Welcome to the 11th episode of Redeeming the Time. I am your host, Jacob Wells. This is my dad, Keith Eric Wells.
Hello.
And thank you for joining us for yet another week. We are here in the beautiful library of Friendship Baptist Church.
Yeah.
And we are recording on a different day, so the vibes are a little different.
Yeah, a little bit. Sun's in a different spot on the day.
Yeah, so we're excited. We're on all major platforms, and if you'd like to contact the show, some of you have, which we're loving, and we have a joke from somebody. So you can.
I haven't heard it yet, so I'm looking forward to this dad joke from a dad.
Yeah. yes, and a grandpa. So you can email us at redeemingthetimepod@gmail.com if you'd like to reach us. Send us jokes, send us questions, comments, concerns, all that jazz. So, but first, we have two conversations here.
All right. Next week, we're going to talk about the tournament, the greatest sporting event
ever. Yes.
NCAA men's basketball tournament.
March Madness, baby.
Yeah, but not this week. It's too early. We've got conference play going this week.
Yeah, but we'll leave it for
our teams
next
will
week.
make it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we're looking at the championship, not making it. But so you have created a massive lead on our little competition that we have.
Which one?
Subways.
Oh, yeah.
And
subways and mass
systems.
Transit systems, yes. I know, we're nerds, but...
we were tied about 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah, I'm like 4 ahead now.
Yeah. So for those of you listening, watching, we have a little competition of who has been on the most subways or train
mass transit system.
Yeah, all this. Yeah. So like Chicago's the L, New York, all these things. And when I went on the mystery trip over to Finland and England, I tied him up because he was up by 2, but I got Finland and England, but now he's like 4 ahead because he went over to Greece, and he literally went one stop on the subway system there.
In 2 different cities I did.
So that he could just beat me.
We just got back from a trip to Miami. We had like round trip tickets, $38 on Frontier. You know, you got to sit on a pine box, but whatever. And they have a metro system, and
I got a text.
I didn't tell you. It took a half hour to go one stop and one stop back. It's not very quick, but
you're up more. I think
up.
you're up 3 or 4. So, but with that, we have another conversation. Near-death experiences.
Oh, wow.
Have you ever had? It's nothing to do with.
Wow. We went from superhero.
We've done sports,
skills,
movies.
Yeah. We're just doing frivolous stuff now here. This one's not frivolous, but
yeah. So, have you ever had a near-death experience?
I guess a couple times. I had one like right before starting college up in Lafayette, West Lafayette, and I was half a step from right in front of a car on this massive busy road. There's not a lot of busy roads in West Lafayette, but nonetheless. And your grandma put her arm out, else I would have stepped right in front of this car. So yeah, I would have been dead for sure.
Way to go, Nana.
Yeah. And then Brent will laugh at this. He and I went down to Red River Gorge one time. I wouldn't call this near death, but it's pretty close. And they tell you to put your food up. Yeah. And
you guys didn't?
And we did. We tied it up in a tree a fair distance away from us. And that night, we heard a bear. And it was just, you could hear it stepping on these little twig trees around it. And this noise. I couldn't go to sleep. And Brent's like gone. I guess he figured he could outrun me. I don't know. I can outrun the fat guy. So
you don't have to be faster than the bear, just the guy next to you.
Yeah, exactly. He's out. That might be because my snoring kept him up the night before, too. But that was a little...
unnerving.
And then come find out the next morning, he had candy bars in his jacket that he was wearing in the tent.
Oh, my God.
It's like, dude. But we survived.
Yeah.
And to be mocked another day.
Yeah.
How about you?
So we went out west as a family, a two week thing, and we were at Devil's Tower. And
Oh yeah,
so what happened was Austin and I,
this
my
is
cousin,
yeah, this is legit.
we were bouldering, and we were like jumping from boulder to boulder and just having fun. We didn't realize that we could go all the way up to the base, so we were just like playing around the
Yeah.
ones right there.
They have boulders the size of like a VW Buck
Yeah, it's
at
huge.
the base of
yeah,
this.
and there's so much fun. Just yeah, great time. But so everybody else kept walking, but Austin and I we were behind because we were running around being 10-year-old boys. So we're running back on the path to get back to our parents and our families. And while we were running, there were people up on like climbing the Devil's Tower, and we're running, and then all of a sudden a rock falls right in front of us.
Like a rock.
A rock, and it bursts and it keeps going and like flies into the woods to our right, like coming from our left, slams right in front of us and goes flying. So if we would have been running a split second faster or
Yeah.
take one more step, I would have gotten macked by I don't know how big the rock
It's
was.
it's a
it doesn't
stupid
matter.
trail because if you've never been there, it's this butte that just right out in the middle of nowhere just shoots up, and it's there's a term for it, but it just looks like cylinders of almost looks like mud daubers.
Yeah.
You know how they, and if you've ever seen Close Encounters of the Third Kind, that's where they filmed the final scene there. And so it's just like this, and the trail is literally around the base of it, right up against the wall. So you could have. I'm surprised there's not people that get hit all the time.
Yeah.
Actually, we had two that time. You had that, and then
we went.
Then
off the
Austin, you
trail.
and I decided, hey, let's go hiking a little bit because everybody else was being boring, and we walked down in this creek bed, and we hear.
Yeah.
And it was a baby rattlesnake, and we were pretty close to it.
Yeah.
And apparently the babies have no
control of their venom.
yeah, so they're actually more deadly than a normal one.
Yeah.
But we did.
Did you almost step on her, or was it Austin?
It was Austin. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was Austin. We were pretty close to it.
Yeah, that was.
Got a picture, so
Yep.
that was a
Maybe
fun trip.
Maybe I'll
Fun
put
trip.
it on there. But move.
I'll find one on Google. It's enormous.
Yeah, like just
Yeah.
massive thing. But
All right, let's
anyway,
get to
for
it.
the things that you are here for, we
Well,
got.
there's battles today, so there you go. Near-death
Yes.
experiences.
Oh, yes.
There's the tie-in.
We're
That's
stretching.
terrible.
All right, we got Joshua this week. One of my favorite books of the Bible. The first sermon I did in
okay.
church was on Joshua, and I covered the first 10 chapters.
You know, my very first sermon here was out of Joshua too. I didn't think about that.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
looking back on that sermon, I was I watched it going into. I was so nervous. I didn't understand how to do sermon prep. I was.
Yeah.
It was, but I
Well,
love
we
this
spent
book.
weeks in Numbers and Deuteronomy. Now we've got 1 week
Yeah.
in the whole book of Joshua.
10 weeks in the first 5 books, and now we're blitzing through.
Yeah.
Joshua.
So as you read through this week, the meat of this is at the beginning. Then he's going to divvy out the inheritance at the end. Some of that's just a bunch of spots you have no idea where they are, and that's okay. Don't get bogged down in having to know every one of those names. So we'll get to that. So
Yeah.
Joshua 1,
So Monday we got the first 4 chapters here. So chapter 1, we left off Moses' death in 34, which some people believe that was supposed to be part of Joshua because it kind of sets the stage for Joshua's leadership. But it's just a continuation.
Yeah, it's a continuation. We're going to spend a lot more time at the beginning of this book than we are at the end, so don't get all worried when you look down at the time and they're only through chapter 12, that kind of thing.
Here we see Joshua is now in charge, and he starts off with encouraging the people. This is a major theme in here, being strong and courageous. And
There's a lot of symbolism here. The word Joshua means Jehovah Savior, and he is a type of Christ. Captain of our salvation, Hebrews 2, verses 10 and 11. Now listen to some of the type of this. He comes after Moses, which represents the law. So salvation, Jesus comes after the law. He leads them to victory. He is their advocate after defeat, which we'll see in Joshua 7. And he allots our portion. as we have as well. So Moses, the law, could never give victory and bring us into the promised land, where Joshua, Jesus, can. So there's the symbolism there. One of the historians estimates the events of this book took 26 years. I don't believe that's true, and I think it was much less than that based on what we see later on with Caleb, because Caleb winds up being 85 years old when they give him his inheritance. Maybe it is. I mean, I'm not a historian with all that, but to me that seems a little off.
Yeah, and here it says it has 7 years here.
Yeah, that makes more sense to me. So in verses 1 through 9, the Lord calls on Joshua 3 different times. He tells him to be strong and of good courage, or very good courage. So, there's this promise. God makes a promise. I'm going to protect you. Imagine God telling you that. I'm going to protect you. Nothing's going to happen to you during these battles. You'd fight a little different, wouldn't you?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we know that God's not going to let anything happen unless, he wants that to occur. But that doesn't mean we can't tempt fate. If I jump off the roof of this house, this church, gravity's going to take its toll. So don't take that too far. There's also interesting verses 10 and 11. He gives them 3 days to prepare to go into the promised land.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if there's anything there or not.
12 through 16, it takes you back to Numbers 32, where the Gadites, Reubenites, and half of Manasseh wanted land east of Jordan.
Right, and that's over and over. We're going to see that brought up. Yeah.
So Joshua has them pledge their allegiance, and they...
Yeah, and verses 16 through 18, they strongly acknowledge Joshua as their leader, and they encourage him to be strong and of good courage too.
Yeah.
So they're with him. So
it says that they pledge their loyalty to Joshua as they did with Moses.
Yeah,
that's pretty cool.
So he's now there. He's the leader. Then we get into Joshua 2, which is a very familiar chapter. If you've read through Joshua before, this is Rahab and the spies. He sends 2 spies out to check out the land, especially the walled city of Jericho.
How big were those walls? Well, we'll get into that.
Yeah. They were large. We'll talk about that in a second. But verses 9 through 11 shows the Lord's actions for Israel. They preceded them, and Rahab accredits it to God in heaven. They know, the people of Jericho know God is the one that is doing this. So he has sent forth this terror of the Israelites of what God is going to do to them. And the cool thing, verse 21, the scarlet thread that's used, that whole, of safety and covered through this sacrifice. Now, it's not specifically said here. Salmon is the guy who winds up marrying Rahab, and he's of the tribe of Judah. And it's a lot of people believe he's probably one of these 2 spies. Based on his age, he could have definitely been that. But Salmon is the one that marries Rahab, and she has Boaz, which, then we'll see how that trickles along down to King David. So that's real important when we get to the book of Ruth. Yeah. That's important.
Yeah, the big application, which is always used in sermons on this, is, well, not always, but one of them is that God will use anybody for...
Yeah.
You don't have to be she was a harlot.
Yeah,
and God can use you if you are willing.
Yeah, and he can forgive, and he can restore, and he can bless, and all of those things. Incredible story.
Yep.
All right.
So then we get into chapter 3, where they are They're entering into the promised land.
Yeah.
But Joshua instructs the priests to go first,
right,
and carry the ark, and then stand in the middle of the river, and and the water ceases to stream, and they walk on dry ground.
It says there in verse 4 that this is a new place. If you read that, it says, "For ye have not passed this way heretofore." So this is a new place for them. This is a place they put their eyes on God. I love in verses 14 through 17. Imagine this happening. So this river that's coming down, and it says that the water stood as a heap, and the ground. And then it says that they walked across on dry ground. So this is a muddy riverbed, maybe stones, we don't know, but nonetheless, the water is in a heap. How does that happen?
Yeah.
It's coming out of a mountain. I mean, gravity is gravity, so it just is growing.
Yeah, my mind immediately went to the logistics of it. Like,
Yeah,
how
yeah.
did this happen?
But also, everything down,
That's what
it's cut off, and now it's dry.
So what I was thinking was, when the water streamed, did they just have a big piece of it? Because, like, in my mind, thinking about it, before reading this, I was just like a hallway, or like a I don't know, a big hallway.
Oh, like
that
the Red
people-
Sea parting.
Yeah, but
This is
Pro-
just one side
Yeah.
held back. Yeah.
So they could have had so much.
And it's interesting. It says, verse 10, this was done so it might embolden the Israelites. So they see this. Yeah, it would embolden you. God's letting us do this. And it says there, the crossing into the promised land, which is, in Christ, cut off from the waters at Adam. I don't know. That's some pretty cool symbolism there with that. I wouldn't read into it too much, but that's neat that's the place.
Yeah, very cool.
So they get across, and now he has some new instructions. I guess we're on day 2 here.
No, we're still on day 1.
Okay.
Yeah, chapter 4 here.
The 2 memorials.
Yep, one on Gilgal. The plains of Jericho, pretty much, and this one's for remembrance of what just happened, like,
right.
So that the next generations can see this and know what God did. And then the other one, where the priest stood in the middle of
Right.
in the middle of where the ark was, in the middle of the river.
So these guys are standing there. These priests are standing there with the Ark of the Covenant on their shoulders, the bar on their shoulders, as 2 million people cross over that with all of their cattle, with all of their possessions, all of this type of stuff. And verse 6 is worth underlining, in my opinion. What mean ye these stones? So when they set these stones up, the whole thing is a memorial. It's exactly, so when people see it, what's this mean? There's probably something in your house that you keep on a bookshelf, and the family says, well, what's this? And it was to tell the future generations what God had done, bringing them into the land. And then verses 7 through 9, the 12 stones are from the river. Each tribe takes one. And then Joshua sets up 12 stones right there in the river. So this is a picture of Christ's death in place of the sinner, and then the sinner's deliverance from judgment as they enter into the promised land. So entering the promised land is not, as many old-time songs talk about, of entering into heaven. No, it's entering into God's rest. It's entering into salvation and the abundant life as you think about that.
Yeah.
And I'd add one more thing there. I'm talking too much, I know.
No.
Verse 12 talks about the children of Reuben and the children of Gad and the half tribe of Manasseh passed over armed before the children of Israel, and Moses spake unto them. So once again, these 2.5 tribes go over as they promised. Who does not go over? Their families.
Yeah.
So because of their decision to not completely follow God in this, their families, they do, their families never experience the blessing of going into the promised land. I
didn't even think about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's every time I think of,
because they wanted that piece.
They wanted that. They wanted the worldly part of it, and they didn't want the blessings of God. And they took those over the blessings of God. And as Christians, too many times we settle and not following after the Lord there. So
for me, verse 14 is the one that I underlined. On that day, the Lord magnified Joshua in the sight of all Israel, and they feared him as they feared Moses all the days of his life.
Yeah.
The Lord magnified Joshua for that's awesome.
Yeah.
So then we get into Tuesday. We got chapters 5 through 8.
Okay.
And the first one for me, I don't know, the wording here is pretty funny. Where neither this is toward the end, but neither was their spirit in them anymore. Talking about the people, like
Oh yeah, yeah. Verse
their spirit was not in them anymore. They were so afraid of what God and the Israelites were going to do to them. Their spirit left them.
yeah. Verse 1 even says their heart melted.
Yeah.
Prior to that, yeah, it's a big.
But then we get into God instructs Joshua to circumcise the people because the wilderness generation has not been.
Yeah, that's weird. That's
Yeah, I don't
to
know
me
why.
that was odd that they went for 40 years and didn't
do that.
follow that one major rule. That, I mean, that was that linked them to Abraham.
Mhm.
And then this is the first verse I preached on here at Friendship.
Yeah.
When as a staff member years ago, verse 11. And they did eat of the old corn of the land on the morrow, after the Passover of unleavened cakes, and parched corn in the same day. And the manna ceased on the morrow after they had eaten of the old corn of the land. There's no more manna.
Yeah.
They no more of just going with the provision that God had day to day to just to sustain them. Now they've entered into the blessings of God completely here.
The land of milk and honey.
Yeah.
So at the end of this, 13 through 15, Joshua went over to look at Jericho, and he sees something. He sees somebody.
Yeah. The captain of the host of the Lord. And so who do you think this is? Do you think this is an angel, or do you think...
Well, it said...
I think you got to tie in the beginning of chapter 6 with this to make a decision on that.
Yeah, because he gives it this... Whoever this is gives Joshua's some guidance on here and on what to do with Jericho. So
he says,
you believe...
Joshua says, "Art thou for us or for our adversaries?" And the answer is... Nay. Neither.
But as captain, yeah. So
who do you think?
I think it's a Christophany.
Okay, I do too. What's your reason why?
Well, it's because it says in that same verse in 14, "Host of the Lord, am I now come?" And Joshua fell on his face to the earth and worshipped it, and said unto him, "What saith my Lord unto his servant?"
Yeah.
And it talks about how he needs to take his sandals off, and because
it's holy ground.
The ground is holy. When did that happen?
Right.
With Moses talking to the burning bush.
Yeah, where the Lord was there.
So.
Yeah, I agree. Because angels will not allow, over and over, you'll see anytime someone bows to an angel, they say, no, you stand up. And
you're about to preach on that.
Right. And in chapter 6, he calls them, and the Lord said unto Joshua. This is the same conversation.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I believe that is.
So then we get into the famous account of Jericho. Joshua fought the battle of Jericho. So he gives the instructions 6 days. They go around with the ark one time each day. Then the 7th day, they go around 7 times. You know the story. And blow the trumpets and scream. Just what I've been thinking about is if you were in Jericho.
Yeah, I was the psychological warfare that this was.
Yeah,
that you're terrified already, and they're just blowing these horns with 2 million people going around your city every day.
Yeah, and then on the 7th day, the walls fall, and your protection, your false sense of protection, is not there anymore.
Yeah, and. This also, I think, ties in, you'll see throughout Scripture, is the non-conventional way that God chooses to do things. And that's okay, because this shows that it was God and not our wisdom that did this. Yeah. And we'll see this all the time. But I do think it was psychological torture of anything. So what we were in Jericho back in 2018, there's not much in the city of Jericho. But what they've dug up, there looked like there was an embankment, and you'll see several times. I think verse 5. It talks about going up or ascending, and there was this embankment, and then the wall. so that ascending makes sense. If all the wall fell, there still would have been that little bit of ledge that they had to go up and over to get into the city. And the key to this one is verse 18, because we're going to see this tie in now to chapter 7 and 8. If we go back into Numbers and Deuteronomy, one of the rules was the first battle, the first rewards of war, they went to the Lord.
Yeah.
And that's what he tells them, to stay away from the accursed thing. And
to destroy everything, everybody except the silver and gold, and that was to go into the treasury of the Lord.
Right.
Yeah.
Verse 22, they keep their promise to Rahab, which is good, which is interesting. And then
saves everybody in her kin.
And then verse 26, Joshua sets a curse on the city, that whoever decides to redo this city, they'll start it with one son and end it with their other. And in 1 Kings 16:34, we see that exactly come out. This is known as the, anytime you read from here on and you hear the city of palms, it refers to the city of Jericho. That's what it's talking about. I remember trying to find that years ago.
Yeah. In verse 27, I thought it was pretty cool. And so the Lord was with Joshua, and his fame was noised throughout all the country. Yeah. So that happened, and everybody's like, and you'll see here in the next few chapters where they're
scared.
Yeah, they're scared of him.
Yep. Then we get to the famous chapter 7, and a lot happens in this chapter, a lot to see. First, Joshua doesn't ask the Lord this time. Yeah. And then in verses 7, so they go up to the city of Ai, and they said, "Oh, just send 2,000 or 3,000 people."
Yeah, because it was a smaller city.
Right.
Yeah.
And which we find out later, there was 12,000 people in there, so even that was crazy. But I guess the whole thing, one man will chase 1,000 type, was the thinking there. But
yeah, but they get defeated.
Yeah, they get defeated, and 36 guys die. And verses 7 through 9, this is quality. Joshua is praying, and his prayer is shocking after Jericho. Yeah. And he sounds just like that past generation. "Oh, why did you bring us here just to die here?" I'm like, this is Joshua. This isn't like just a normal schlup.
Yeah, why did you bring us over here to be defeated?
And look at verse 10. This is great. The Lord says to Joshua, "Get thee up. Wherefore liest thou upon thy face?" Get up. What are you doing down there? Israel hath sinned, he says.
Yeah.
And
he's wanting to be on the east side of the Jordan.
Right.
Like, he's like, "Why did you bring us over here just to..." Yeah.
And the Lord says 3 things. He says they've taken, they've stolen, and then a word I needed to look up, dissembled, means concealed. They concealed what they did, which we find exactly is what happened.
Yeah. So we come to find out that Achan is the one who took and he hid it. He took what was supposed to be the Lord's, and he hid it.
Yeah, so they take the tribe, then they take a family out of the tribe, and then they just narrowing it down to this guy. And look at verse 19. Verse 19 is interesting. And Joshua said to Achan, he says, "My son, give, I pray thee, glory to the Lord God of Israel, and make confession unto him." So he puts together giving God glory by making confession. I find that interesting. That this is what happens here. Now, once again, this first things, there's an example set when we get into the book of Acts. Ananias and Sapphira, they lie about giving, and they both drop dead because of their lie. Mm-hmm. And it was the first big thing, and it's this example set because everybody else is going to learn from that for sure.
So they're Achan's house.
Yep.
They take him and they kill him in the valley of Achor.
Yep.
They don't just kill him; they burn him.
Yeah,
it's a brutal.
Yeah, it's brutal.
Then they form another stone memorial in remembrance. Remember what happened here.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a theme throughout.
And it's interesting that he said Israel has sinned. Not just Achan, but the whole country is feeling the wrath of this.
Yeah, his sin affected so many more people.
Yeah, 36 people died. Yeah.
And now his family. So
there's
for me, that's the thing that the application or the thing that I think about is like, your sin affects more than just you.
Your sin affects your church.
Yeah.
I have watched in my lifetime where sin has, you could just feel the coldness and the chill in the church services when you're together, and just the lack of being able to move forward because there's sin in the camp.
Yeah.
And it needs to be rectified. So.
Yep. So.
Josh, wait.
One of my favorite chapters, to be honest with you. I love it.
Really,
this.
I've got like 4 lines down here for this one because it's just a battle.
Yeah, but
go ahead.
The good old bait and switch.
Yeah.
So.
Go ahead and describe it.
So you got AI, and in the middle here, you got AI. They instruct people to come from this side, from the south, right?
From the west.
From the west,
yeah.
Sorry.
So they're on the side, yeah.
So they're on the side here, and they get the attention, and they're
Oh, I'm sorry. They're on the north. I apologize. I thought you meant the guys in
Either way. So they get the AI's attention, and they're so eager because they just defeated them. Let's do it again. So they go chasing after them. Well, when they go chase after them, then from the west, there's another group that comes in, destroys the city, and when AI looks back and sees their city destroyed, and now they're surrounded, they just collapse on them. And
they still teach this and other of Joshua's military tactics at military schools. But yeah, they slip in behind and surround them. This time,
that's awesome.
God tells them to do this, and he tells them to send everybody.
Yeah,
So there's hundreds of thousands to defeat these 12,000 people. And then verses 30 through 35 is a fulfillment of Deuteronomy 27. This is where they set up on Mount Ebal and Gerizim, if you remember that, and they have the blessings and the cursings. We talked about this last week. So that happens there.
So I think this is a good time to mention this, that the stone memorials that they keep putting. I mean, this is 4 or 5 now. This is what the Lord was speaking to me. Like, what are my stone memorials? Am I putting something up? I log the things that the Lord has done for me? Do I write them down? Do I have something like a mission trip? Do I have a picture of that in my house so that I can remember the Lord working? Or because there's a difference between that and just remembering and thinking about him.
It doesn't.
Like having something that you can see tangible.
And tell the next generation about.
Yeah. And
Bill Hayes is really good at that.
Yeah,
of all people I know, he's the best at doing that. In his office, he has multiple things to remind you. And I remember on a mission trip, very first mission trip to Brazil with the Matthews, we were sitting there our last day at our devotion, and he said, "Write this down, because you will forget this." And I've never forgot that because we wrote it down and remember those things.
There's a few things from Camp Chautauqua where there was a rock one time.
Yeah.
There was a bookmark that
something that
we gave they gave to us so that we could remember what the Lord was working on.
All right, well, let's keep moving.
Yep. So now we're into Wednesday, 9 through 11.
Like I said, the rest of this is going to go quick once we get past 12. So.
Yeah. So we got the tricky Gibeonites in chapter 9. I also find this very interesting.
They're Hivites, The Gibeonites are of the Hivites.
So they hear that Joshua and his army are destroying city after city, and so they devise a plan to trick them, not fight them, but trick them. And they say that they're from a distant land, and we would like to join you in your camp. And Joshua does not ask God again.
Right.
And
they're sneaky. I mean, they put on old clothes.
Yeah.
They get moldy bread and wine pouches.
We traveled so long.
Yeah. They're sneaky. And apparently it was a large city, because the next chapter we find out that it was one of the largest cities in that region, and they don't find out till afterwards.
Yes. So he's tricked into signing a treaty. Then Joshua finds out that they're actually their neighbors.
Yeah.
And
verse 19 of that really shows, this is something they're restricted now by their own actions because they didn't go to the Lord. And that's the thing to learn from this is, how many things are you have to, as a Christian, we're bound to our word. So how many times did you not go to the Lord, and then you put yourself in a situation and now you're restricted by that? And I've done that many times, unfortunately, and just because I didn't go to the Lord. Yeah. So that's what we get there.
But at the end, he keeps the treaty. He doesn't kill them, but
makes them servants.
Servants cutting wood.
which then goes into the next chapter, because now they're bound to Gibeon, and 5 kings hear that they've done this, and they go, okay, we're going to go destroy you. And so they go up to them and they say, hey, you said you'd protect us, so now you got to protect us. I'm thinking like America having to go to some crazy little country because we've made a promise to them, and we got to go help them, and that's what happens here.
Yeah, and God, and he affirms the victory for them.
Yeah.
And then
even God says you're going to get the victory, and now some crazy stuff happens in this chapter.
Verse 11 starts it off with a hailstorm.
Yeah. More soldiers are killed by hailstorms sent by God. And these are like apparently massive stones.
Yeah.
And they're killing guys more than the Israelites killed. So God's taking them out. And then Joshua, who just in verse 8, God told him, you're going to get this victory today. So he's like, okay, all right. And he speaks out and he tells the sun and the moon to stay in their place. How's that work?
Yeah.
I mean, this is obviously a miracle, but okay.
Now what? Yeah.
How does this work? Did time stop? Did the earth stop rotating? If the earth stops rotating, we don't have gravity and we start floating. So, I mean,
he got nerdy with it.
I mean, the whole universe is spinning. What happened here? I mean, did just everything stop? And the Lord just let this battle. I don't know.
Did the sun just no, that sun doesn't. We revolve around. Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, it's a miracle that occurred here, but I don't know how it happened. There's all kinds of people that say they trace back, and there's one day missing, and no one knows that because they don't know how many days there actually have been. So don't fall into that trap on that way. And then he says he makes this thing like wasn't even written in the book of Jasher. Like even this guy took note of it and referenced it, and that book's referenced in 2 Samuel 1 too. We don't know what that book is. There was a book I looked up in the 18th century that was named that as well. So don't go looking because you're not going to know. That's not what it is here.
Yeah. But he wipes them out. Like all the southern cities that they were. Yeah. They wiped them out.
So here's an important thing now. I think I want to stop for a second on this. And this is from the rest of the point of this on. I think it's going to be important for you to know some geography. And what I'd encourage you to do, you're not going to be able to see it here. Jacob might be able to put it on for those that are watching it. But you need a good map for the rest of this book, or this, the book of Joshua. There are knowing the layout, the topography of Israel, and then knowing where the different tribes are going to be located. I encourage you to get the Holman Bible Atlas. We're not sponsoring them; they're not sponsoring us. So don't. But this is a great book. It's like
fantastic.
It's like a $20 book. Well worth it.
Fantastic.
And if not, do this. Just Google Holman Bible Atlas 12 Tribes of Israel. Somebody has taken a picture and put it on Google, I can promise. But if you can see here, this little map here, I'll ask Jacob to put it up. There are 4 north to south strains through the country. On the far west, we have the Mediterranean Sea, and then you have the coastal plains. And that's flat area. It's mostly farm area. And then there are like the rolling hills going up to the western range. Between that is an area called I don't never pronounce this right, but the Shifla. And it is rolling hills, valleys. It's where a lot of this is where Abraham would have had the sheep that he had and all the patriarchs after that. So you've got the coastal plain, the western mountains. This is where Jerusalem is, Ai, all of that. Then a descent really quick into the Jordan Rift. And this is where they started, in Jericho. And the Dead Sea's here, the Sea of Galilee's up here. And then there's a real high bank, and you get into the eastern plateau. This is where the 2.5 tribes are, Reuben, Gad, and half of Manasseh. So you've got these 4 north to south different strips is how the country is sort of broken up. And this is important as we go into what they're going to conquer here in the next few times. They're all down in Gilgal, which is in the bottom.
Yeah, the southern part of it.
They're down in the Jordan Rift, and they go up the hill to Ai, and this is so far they've been in the south part of Palestine, on the mountains down into the Shiphala. So they've taken the southern part of the country so far, and now in Joshua 11 we're going to see them go up into the north.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
So in chapter 10, there was 5 kings that formed an alliance, and we see this again in the northern because they're afraid.
Yes.
So they joined forces.
So this time they go along. I often wondered, why did they stay down in the valley? Well, that's where all the food was. That's where it was all well watered. So, and then they would climb those mountains. Well, now they go along that ridge toward the north, and there's between the mountains to the west, they could go up into Galilee, all right around Capernaum, where Jesus will be much later on. But they go up this ridge there, and that's where we see in Joshua chapter 11. They take all the cities in the north, and they go down all the way to the coast this time.
Mm-hmm.
So they've taken them. They didn't take all the cities, but that's what they've taken so far. And then we get to Joshua 12.
Joshua 12, Thursday, and we see the all-encompassing list.
Yeah, it's just a
who
list.
They conquered.
The 2.5 tribes, what they took on the eastern plateau under Moses, and then the rest of the chapter, 31 kings Joshua overtakes here.
The king of Medan, the king.
Don't go crazy reading all that.
Yep. So then we get into chapter 13. See, we're after 12.
It's flying.
Chapter 13. This is all about the unconquered stuff that was left, right?
Unconquered, and then
still to be conquered.
And then 8 through 33 gives what the 2.5 tribes had done on the eastern side.
Yeah, the boundaries there.
Yeah.
And
like I said, this is where you would need a good map to show. Let me get it back. If you go, if you get this book, it's page 38. If you don't get this book, it's not 38.
It's on Google.
No, it's 84. Yeah, I'm really close. 84. And there's this great map here that shows where the different tribes wind up landing. Google the tribal allotments of Israel, and this map will show up, and it'll show you where all of these different tribes are. So this chapter that it's talking about what's on the 2.5 tribes on the eastern side.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's one break in chapter 14.
Yeah, and it's all about Caleb and his faithfulness. It highlights his faithfulness when Moses sent him as a spy, and now he's 85, still serving the Lord, and he asked, he's a wild man, that's what you were talking about. Like, he asked Joshua for what Moses had promised him with like an inheritance.
Give me this mountain.
Yeah, in 11 and 12, it says, "And yet as I am strong this day as I was in the day that Moses sent me." He's like, I'm still ready. "And as my strength was then, even so is my strength now, for war both to go out and to come in. Now therefore give me this mountain, whereof the Lord spake in that day."
And he says, "If so be the Lord will be with me."
Yeah. It's just very cool. He's ready. He's 85, but ready to still kick butt.
Now look at this testimony of him. Verse 9, it says, this is his testimony. He has wholly followed the Lord my God. That's a cool testimony.
Yeah.
Here's a guy his entire life, and now at the end he is finishing strong.
Yeah.
It should be all of our
goals.
And
it's him and Joshua.
Yep.
And I'm sure they're pretty close. Those two are following the Lord. Pretty cool. So then we get into 15, and we see some of the allotment of for Judah. We see the account of Othniel.
Yeah, which is important. I think the only reason they bring that up is next week we're in the book of Judges. Othniel is one of the judges.
Yeah.
One of the first judges there. And you say, why all this detail? I don't know these towns. Well, all this detail, remember, this is their inheritance forever. So they need to know where their landmarks and their boundaries are. So that's why that's there.
And it is in detail.
It is detailed.
It is detailed.
Yeah.
So, but we also see Caleb take that mountain, drives out the Anakites.
Yeah.
The Anakin.
Not the Anakins.
I'm a nerd. Yeah.
He killed all the younglings.
But he oh my gosh. Yeah.
That's a Star Wars thing if you don't know Star Wars. All right.
So, but he also promises it's the whole thing there with Othniel. He promises.
Yeah.
He promises whoever smites Kirjath Sepher or whatever
Gets his daughter
gets his
to
daughter,
marry. And she gets a bunch of inheritance out of her dad. She's pretty shrewd herself.
Yeah.
Joshua 16 talks about what Ephraim gets and the half of Manasseh on the west side.
So now,
Manasseh has more land than any of the other tribes.
Yeah.
It's when you put both the east and the west together, but most of it's mountain.
Yeah. So now we're into Friday.
Yeah.
So we're moving along here. So
This is where our map's good. Joshua 17. These girls show up again. The daughters of
Zelophehad.
Yeah, they show up again. They do get their inheritance. I love this. Verses 14 through 18. I won't mention anything else in this chapter, but they come, Joseph, Ephraim, and Manasseh, they come and complain because they say, they be a great people.
Yeah.
Quite humble. They're great people. And Joshua tells them, well, if you're so great, go conquer that mountain and you can have it.
Yeah.
I love it. He's just like, I'm done with you. That's pretty funny.
Yeah.
What are they going to do? You know?
Yeah, they're like a tree.
Yeah, it's filled with.
Drive out the city and
Chop down the wood and you can have it.
Yeah, they're like a city. They're like a tree that needs to be chopped down.
Joshua 18. Go
so
ahead.
They don't drive the Canaanites out.
Not all of them.
Yeah. So
They said they were too powerful. They had the iron. They had the iron chariots and all that.
So we'll see that. We'll see that.
Yeah, this
later
comes
on.
back to bite them.
But
yeah.
Yeah, and then in 16 they don't, or in 15 they don't drive out all the Jebusites either.
No.
In 15. So I just.
Yeah, not till David do they drive out the Jebusites.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, and winds up being a thorn in their side all through the book of Judges.
Yeah. So now we got 18.
Yeah. Now the tabernacle is moved. So now it was in the valley. Now they've moved it up and they've put it in Shiloh. Now Shiloh is up on top of the mountain in the mountain region, and it's in Ephraim. It's just a bit north of where Ai was, if you're looking on a map trying to figure out where that is. It is almost dead center in the middle of the country. I think that's probably why it was there. But Joshua in verse 3, he's a bit irritated with them that they were not more eager to go capture the land.
Yeah.
So there's 7 more tribes that don't have their allotment. And he takes 3 from each of those tribes and says, okay, go out to the rest of the land, get a survey of what it looks like, and we're going to cast lots and divide the rest of it. So everybody else, these other tribes, they get everything very specific, and he's like, we're just going to cast lots for the rest of you. And that's what happens.
That is what happens, yeah.
Benjamin gets first, and then Joshua 19, the other 6 get theirs.
So now we're into Saturday, chapter 19 through 21.
So Simeon,
Zebulun.
Well, interesting, they get part of the land inside Judah, which fulfills.
Yeah, if you look at the map, it's like, what in the world is going on?
And it fulfills Jacob's promise about them and Levi, how they would be spread, they would be dispersed. So that's what happens.
Yeah. So the 6 remaining after everything is Simeon, Zebulun, Issachar, Asher, Naphtali, and Dan.
Yeah, Dan gets like the leftover. And if you look at the map, it is leftover. It is like nothing.
Yeah.
That's why they go all the way to the north and they capture one inside of Naphtali. They take a city there and they call it Dan.
Is it Naphtali or Naphtali?
I've always said Naphtali. We'll have to ask Brother Rick because he is.
Please comment
He's the wordsmith. Yeah, comment how to pronounce a word.
The pronunciation or whatever the
pronunciation.
Is that?
Yes.
Is there a never mind.
So Naphtali, they get around the Sea of Galilee, and most of Jesus' ministry and several centuries ahead will be there.
Then we see in 19 as well, Joshua.
Yeah, he gets his own inheritance.
Timnath Serah. Yeah.
And then Joshua 20 mentions the cities of refuge, which they did not do as many cities of refuge as they were supposed to.
Yeah, they only did 6.
Yeah.
6. We got Kadesh in Galilee, which is
there were supposed to be 7.
Naphtali, Shechem, which is in Ephraim, Kirjath Arba, which is in Judah, Bezer, and Reuben, which is. I thought it was interesting. Ramoth and Gilead are the tribe of Gad, and then Golan in Manasseh.
Golan. Yeah, Golan Heights.
Golan.
That's north, yeah.
So I just thought it was interesting that there's one on the east.
Yeah, there were two over there.
Two over there.
Yeah, two over there.
So I don't know.
There were supposed to be 7 over there and 7 in the mainland,
Yeah.
and there's 6 total. So I've got to look into that a little more. All right. So then, chapter 21, the Levites get their inheritance. Now, the thing that I found most important about this is Aaron's family. They get 13 cities from Judah, Simeon, and Benjamin. Now, this has to be God's sovereign hand on this because they are right around where the capital city of Jerusalem is eventually going to be. But it wasn't at that time, and they didn't know that's what it was going to be at that time, because David is the one that does that. So I think that's God's sovereign hand keeping the priestly lineage so close to where God's going to put his name.
Yeah. But overall, the Levites get 48 cities.
Yeah, they're all over, spread all over, literally everywhere. Then chapter 22. This is an important one. I called this early danger, and it's going to really show what's going to happen between the different tribes now that they have to live together.
Yeah.
All right.
So now we're into Sunday.
Yeah. So Joshua releases the 2.5 tribes that we've mentioned a million times now.
Blesses them.
Yeah, blesses them, tells them, go back over the Jordan, over to the east side to your families. Take all of the blessings of war that you had. Blessings of war, that's not right. The trophies, the material things that you got from that.
But what do?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Verse 10, and before crossing, they set up an altar. And when the other tribes hear this altar, they're thinking back to what just happened with Achan.
What are you doing?
This is a sin. Why? Because God said, I want you all to come. Remember, we said this last week and the week before that. There is a place where God was going to meet with the people. And that was the only place they were supposed to worship God. And now they've set up another altar. So they're like, uh-oh, this is a problem. This is going to be a big deal.
And they're ready to go to war. They're ready to fight them.
Yeah, verse 10 is the verse here, and then verse 20 is, well, you can do this. So they fully realized that it was sin against God by all of Israel by this happening.
Did not Achan, the son of Zerah, commit a trespass?
Yeah. So a group is sent, one from each tribe, and Phinehas, which we know Phinehas is a zealous guy. He's the guy that put that spear between those two people.
And I'm sorry.
Yeah. So,
I'm sorry. That was dumb.
Yeah.
Phineas and Ferb.
Okay. Different Phineas. Spelled differently, too.
Yeah.
So they go to these two tribes, and they're ready to war, and the 2.5 tribes, they swear, no, this was not the reason.
This was for remembrance.
Yeah. We're afraid that in the future, you that live on the west side in the promised land are going to not see our families as having an inheritance among you. So we set this up to remind you that we're part of you. And they're like, oh, okay. And they're all done. This cracks me up. I'm sorry. I hope I don't get struck down for this. So they set up this altar there. They caused peace. And the altar was called...
I have that too.
Ed. Ed. We shall call him Ed.
Yeah.
That is like Monty Python name. I'm sorry. That just cracks me up. But it means witness. That's why.
Yeah. But
I even got on different things to see what is the pronunciation of this. Is it different?
Eid?
Is it Eid? Yeah, I was hoping it was. It is Ed.
Yeah.
So
that's not a typical name you would think of.
Yeah. Oh.
But
so. If you ever get over there, maybe you can see the old memorial Ed.
I do think about that. You can call me Tim.
Yeah, exactly.
If you know, you know.
And then the last 2 chapters, we got Joshua as an old man.
Farewell speech.
He's basically, he's not quite 110 yet. He's at the end when he dies at 110. But chapter 23... he gathers the leaders together, telling them to finish the job.
Remain faithful.
Remain pure. Yeah.
Reminds them of the victories that the Lord has given him.
I love verses 14 and 15 where God hasn't failed in any of these promises. He keeps reminding them of that. And I think of that today too. Why do we doubt God to do things in a different way? You know, let me say, why would we do things in a different way than what God would tell us to do, knowing that he has never failed his promises, and yet we do it all the time?
Mm-hmm.
And he's reminding them there as well. Why would they ever want to do it their way, seeing what God had done?
Yeah.
So.
For me, the thing that stuck out is like 6 through the rest of the chapter. He's saying for the Lord and the Lord. Like he's nothing we've done, guys. Like it's nothing I did, nothing that you did.
Yeah.
It is Joshua pointing away from him and to the Lord so many different times.
Oh, that's very good. Yeah.
For the Lord and the Lord, that the Lord loved us and that type of stuff. And like,
that's very good. And then the final words of Joshua, he recaps their history in chapter 24.
Well, hold on.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was thinking about this as like, so he tells them like he's warning about intermarrying and against straying for the gods of the people. And he says, if you stray from the Lord, his favor will likewise do that. Joshua was there with Moses when the Lord said,
yeah.
So is
they're going to do it?
That's in the back of his mind.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
While he's telling him, don't do this, but he knows
they're going to do it. Yeah.
And it might not be that generation or whatever, but like,
yeah,
that's
very true.
That's definitely in the back of his brain while he's encouraging these people to stay strong.
And then he recaps their history. Verse 13.
I'm sure it's in his mind. I don't know.
Sure.
Yeah.
In verse 13, I think is an important one because he tells them, you've been given land, you've been given vineyards, you've been given cities. None of this you built or did. I did this. God gave this. And then verse 15, the famous verse, he says, and
if it seem evil unto you to serve the Lord, choose you this day whom ye will serve, whether the gods which your fathers served that were on the other side of the flood, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land ye dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord.
Yep. We have that on the wall in our house.
Yep, right down the hallway.
It's one as a reminder, choose to serve the Lord. And he gives them a warning. And then if you see there in verse 22, he makes them renew the covenant.
Yep.
And they say to themselves, we are witnesses. So once again, they're putting their name on it. He writes it all on a stone and makes it a memorial.
Again.
Yeah. And then verse 29, Joseph dies at 110 years old. And they finish, I find that interesting, they finish saying that Joseph's bones are brought from Egypt and placed in Shechem, in the family cave there.
Yeah.
So all the patriarchs are buried there. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and now Joseph. They're all buried in that cave that was purchased first by Abraham and then repurchased again by Jacob.
Yeah.
And it's really sort of a close of the generations that followed right away, because we're going to get next week and we're going to see as that next generation comes up, they don't so much do that.
Yeah.
So.
And then I found this interesting that like when Moses dies, Aaron dies first, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Aaron dies, Moses dies. So now it's Eleazar and Joshua, and Eleazar dies as well.
Yep.
So it's a whole new.
Yep. Phineas becomes the high priest. Joshua dies, and now we go into a time of judges, which we'll talk about next week, which is a completely different time.
Yeah, and it's a different.
The theocracy, and we'll explain how that all works next week. But interesting stuff.
Yep.
Don't get bogged down in those middle chapters with all the inheritance, but the things from 22 to the end, those are really important, and those early 11, 12 chapters are as well. So all of it's important, but application directly to you, it's going to be harder to.
Yeah. So we got 10 weeks in the Pentateuch. We're out of there. Now we're just blitz through Joshua.
one week in Joshua.
So we'll slow down in like Samuel and King.
Yeah. Next week is Judges. Judges is an incredible book. I've had the opportunity to teach through it 2 different times. I love the book the Book of Judges.
Yeah, I love Joshua.
There's a lot of application for where we are today. So we've talked a lot
Very
today,
cool.
so we better stop.
There's no better way to end than this is our first joke that I did not come up with. This was
Okay.
from someone named Chris Rabe, who gave me this joke and gave me the permission to say it. He emailed me this.
He's the man.
Yes, he is. And so this is
All right, let's hear it. I have not heard this
courtesy
yet.
of Chris. What tree has the best bark? A dogwood.
Dun, dun.
It's so good. And thank you for giving us that so that we can have that reaction. And if you want to have a joke, email me. And we'll see. We'll see what.
Get in
what
the
we
Word
can
of
do
God
there.
this week. This book should renew you after getting through some of the harder stuff in the Pentateuch. This should renew your reading and a lot of narrative here, fun stuff to read.
Yeah. From
So-
here on out, it's like, well,
Yeah, it's good stuff.
yeah,
It's all good stuff. It's the Word of God, but you know what I mean. All right. Love you guys.